Augustine, are you all right there, or do you want to switch around back?
I mean, if I need to
Just turn your chair.
How do we change the next slide?
Yeah, how do you go to the next slide?
You can try hitting the space bar.
Try the arrow keys.
Yes. Yeah. Oh. All right.
If you want to, maybe, Dave, if you want to move over, maybe Gus can sit there so they can see it better.
In the past couple of times we don't use it, so.
No, I know. We will be using it more as the days go on.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if that's because this is a PowerPoint. It has an action in it. It's just what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to the one that I want to start on.
I feel you're more familiar with your own.
Yeah, yeah. All right. I'm just going to. Yeah. You know, you're a team player.
Yeah, there you go, Mike, actually. Seriously. That's the direction I go that.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Oh, we're up and running?
Yes. You can eat sure like that. All right. So.
Introduce yourselves.
My name's Mike Healy. I'm an inspector supervisor with Tiger Home Inspection. I have been in the business since probably almost approaching 30 years. I went to school, got out. There was a big recession going on. We thought it was big, nothing like the last one we had. And I started working. I worked in an architect's firm, did design work. I worked in construction. And I had known the folks that own this company, Tiger Home Inspection. And I tried it, I liked it, and I've been in it since. Probably, I don't know how many years ago, I kind of came inside. I'm in the office now. I do help with the supervision of the inspectors. I do try to get out there. As a home inspector, you do have to stay out there, stay fresh. So I still try to do inspections on a regular basis. It's just hard to do sometimes. I help with the training of new inspectors. I go out and do speaking with real estate brokers. And because we're not a big office, we all pretty much do what we have to do. All right? So what I'm going to do is, with the home inspection law, what I like to kind of stress in the beginning is that the home inspection law is a consumer protection law. It's under the Consumer Protection Division in the government, at the state level. The Board of Registration of Home Inspectors, they're under the wing Consumer Protection. So what we like to do is just touch on how the law came about. And that's, I have in the beginning a crack in the foundation. And what happened is we've had licensing since 2001. Licensing was brought about. A situation arose. It was actually Senator Cheryl Jakes. A neighbor of hers was selling her house. They had an inspection. They found some things wrong. They fixed it. The deal didn't go. They had another inspection, and they found some other stuff wrong. And the deal didn't go. And what the neighbor said was, there seems to be no standardization here. These inspectors come in, they look, they find this, they find that. There's nothing, they're unregulated. And that was the beginning of regulation and licensing. So what happened is the state put together a study, and that's what we're going to look at. It's called In the Beginning, A Crack in the Foundation. And it took place, it was in 1998, A Crack in the Foundation, Unlicensed Home Inspectors in Massachusetts. So this is a report of the Senate Committee on Post-Audit and Oversight in June of 1998. Oh. There it is. Complaints filed with the Attorney General's Office. Why if a disaster? So what we're going to do is, as we go through this, there's going to be different examples that came up. And we're just going to touch on them. And these were some of the things that motivated the law and the regulations. A home inspector gave, and again, this is the Senate had an investigation, so this was retroactive. You know, the deal had been done, the people had moved in. This is what they found. A home inspector gave the wiring in a home an A rating, which indicated the wiring was functioning as originally intended. The inspector also told the potential buyer that the wiring was copper Romex, a brand that is guaranteed to last a lifetime. After the buyer moved in, he discovered that the home was wired with orange extension cords. The estimated cost of rewiring was more than $8,500. I have seen the extension cord wiring job. It was an engineer's house. This was a different house, but it was an engineer, and the extension cord was the same gauge wire as the Romex he would have been using. Now, when I say Romex with wiring, the stuff that we see today, the modern stuff, it's usually white, yellow, orange. It's flexible. They call that Romex. Romex is really a brand name, but everyone refers to it as Romex. This gentleman wired his whole house in spools of extension cord that he bought at Home Depot because it was the right gauge, but it's not the right material. So I understand. I've seen that. A potential buyer noticed an unusual odor coming from the basement and asked the inspector if the smell was coming from the boiler. The home inspector assured the buyer the boiler was simply needed to be cleaned. A week after the closing, a home heating technician informed the new owner that the boiler had oil leaks in 3 separate areas. The estimated cost of replacing the boiler was more than $3,000. Just kind of an editorial from my point of view. A boiler doesn't leak oil. The tank, the line to the boiler may leak oil. The apparatus, which they call the gun or the burner, may leak oil. All those things are addressable. So I'm always curious when I read this one to whatever audience, why the boiler need to be replaced if the source of the oil was the problem. So these complaints, they were legitimate complaints. People had concern. They felt like they were taken advantage of on some level by somebody. But some of the stories to me as a home inspector with 20/20 hindsight, I sometimes wonder about the actual what really took place here. And again, a boiler holds water. It doesn't leak. It can leak water, but it doesn't leak oil unless it's something attached to it. In 1996, an inspector gave the outdoor siding, windows, floor, and toilet of a Medfield home an A rating. After moving in, the buyer found that the siding was rotting from water damage, the windows would not shut properly, the floors were warped, and the toilet did not work properly. The estimated cost of replacing the siding was approximately $20,000. The buyer won the maximum small claims judgment of $2,019 against the inspector. It's $7,500 today, and it doesn't touch what it was going to cost. A recent article and again, recent, this is back in 1998. A recent article in the Ashley Reporter, a monthly newsletter of the American Society of Home Inspectors, further outlined the potential conflict of interest between brokers and home inspectors. In the article, the author wrote, "What is marketing? Market is anything you do to get or keep a customer. Remember where your customers come from. Don't ever forget that buyers come to you through referrals from real estate agents, mortgage brokers, attorneys, and other affiliated groups in the real estate industry. In the home inspection business, we have 2 basic customers, the real estate agent and the home buyer. The home buyer really wants to purchase the house you're inspecting. The goal of the home inspector should be to assist the buyer in figuring out a way to get into the house and not to convince them to kill the deal." That's a famous term. If you haven't heard it, you'll hear it over time. Is that home inspector is a deal killer. And it could be that the person you're working with is shopping in a part of the market where housing stock isn't that great. Generally, it's not the home inspector that'll kill a deal. The house has to kill it too. So, but that is a term you'll run across, the quote deal killer. If we can do this, then we'll have 2 very happy clients: the real estate agent and the home buyer. So this was just a comment. This was back then that as a home inspector, it's always a tricky situation. I'll be at a home inspection. The buyer shows up, first-time home buyer, and they're very weary. This is the biggest investment of their life. They're afraid that someone's trying to hide something. They're not going to find out what they need to know. And the real estate broker shows up, and it's someone I've been doing business with for 15 years. I mean, I know their life, their family, the kids. And if I'm friendly, sometimes my buyer will say, "Yo, do you know the broker? Are you friends?" So they're concerned. And I explained to them, I said, no, I've been in this business for a long time. You meet people, you get to know them. I'm doing my job for you. And that's something that you're looking for, that, you know, the level of trust. Just because I know someone and they're on the, quote, other side, doesn't mean that, you know, I'm a professional. That's what it's all about. All right. I think there was a couple that weren't there. Sorry about that, guys. This is not okay. Siding. Here it is. In 1993, Elizabeth and David Smith decided to buy a home in a historic section of the town of Shirley. The house was inspected prior to purchase. During the inspection, the home inspector noted that there were several areas of wood that were damaged due to rot. The floors were sagging, there were cracks in the walls and ceilings. His report also stated that these conditions were normal, and at no time did he mention that these could be signs of a larger problem. 9 months after purchasing the home, the couple discovered that the house was built directly on the ground, and it was in an advanced state of decay. The structural damage to the house was too extensive to repair. The house will have to be demolished and another built in its place at an estimated cost of $189,000. This is 1993 money. Because $189 won't get you much today. Okay, so the key is you have to hit that twice. So, you know, the hard thing with this is a lot of these complaints were kind of they're investigated in a retroactive sense. It was stuff that had happened and taken place because there was no law in place at the time. So I have, you know, there's some things that don't line up for me, but I do know that, you know, that if that home inspector really did write that it was normal to see, you know, cracks and settlement and what was going on, that definitely wasn't correct. But this was the motivation that led. Come on, you. So these are the findings. The outcome was, this are the findings from the Senate, the committee. In Massachusetts, anyone can call themselves a home inspector and immediately start doing business. Unlike similar professions, there are no uniform standards of practice, code of ethics, or licensing requirements. There is also no regulatory oversight of the industry. Since home inspectors are not regulated, they are not required to carry insurance or a bond to protect home buyers with legitimate claims of negligence. In fact, home inspection companies often seek to contractually limit their liability to the cost of the inspection. That term limited liability really figures in the law today. It's one of the biggest things that they, at the state, the board level, that they concentrate on is making sure that home inspectors aren't limiting their liability. Before this law in 2001, what would happen is if a home inspector did a job, you know, he did a poor job, and they found something catastrophic, like, you know, the house had to be rebuilt, it may be in the contract that the only recourse they had was the value of the home inspection, you know, which probably would have been about $225 back then. So when they talk about limiting liability, that's the kind of stuff. In the United States, not all states have home inspection regulation law. So what happens is, as an example, Rhode Island, which we sometimes, you know, jokingly refer to as the Wild West, if you want to be a home inspector, you're a home inspector. You can put a sign in your truck, you can put an ad in the paper, you're a home inspector. There have been cases where people in Massachusetts who have run into trouble at the board level, they've had the ability to perform home inspections limited or restricted, they'll go and work in Rhode Island because there is no regulation. They do have a law on the books. It's been put in place, but they've never funded it or put together the regulations. So basically, you can go down and, you know, if you want to be a home inspector too, you can go to Rhode Island and do it. So what happened with this was, in Mass, the introduction of regulation, we have to have insurance. You know, we have to become a home inspector. There's requirements we'll talk about a little bit later. There's requirements to become. There's continuing ed. There's all stuff that if you're going to be a home inspector, there's a level of commitment and an ongoing level of commitment. It's not just something that you're going to jump into, you're going to get it and leave. It's a lot like with real estate brokers. Even, you know, once you become a real estate broker, that's not the end. There's ongoing education, continuing education. You have to keep on learning. There are no laws or regulations preventing a real estate broker from recommending a specific home inspector, creating a potential conflict of interest between a home inspector's duty to his client and the need to maintain a favorable referral relationship with a real estate broker. Home buyers lack sufficient knowledge about home inspections, and the Commonwealth has not made an effort to educate the home buying public. All right. So that was the beginning. So they, that was the study at the Senate level. That came out, and at that point they started working on it. There were hearings throughout the state. We attended, Tiger Home Inspection. I attended all of these meetings at that time. There was a lot of input. They came up with the regulations. 2001, they were implemented. In about every 5 to 7 years, they've been readjusted and corrected. We just went through a rewrite just recently. Regulations at the beginning of 2018, the end of 2017, a new set of regulations. They're constantly trying to get it so that it addresses the needs of the consumer. And that's the hard part is people say, with the regulations, as a home inspector, why don't you make sure that you're not on the hook for this or this or this? And what happens is that's not what it's about. It's about making sure that the consumer is protected, that they're informed, and that they get what they need. All right? So that's that's kind of the beginning of it all. What I'd like to do is just talk about, to become a home inspector, what this leads up to is to become a home inspector in Mass, you have to take a 75-hour course. And that's usually, a lot of times people do it at night. There's a couple different places that offer it. Sometimes weekends. There is one place that does it in consecutive days. So you have to take a 75-hour course. You have to pass the National Home Inspector's exam. And then what happens is you've taken the course, you've passed the test. Now what you need to do is find a licensed home inspector and you're going to work with them. It's more of a mentoring type position. In the way that we approach it, when I say we, I mean Tiger, the company that I work with, is what we do is we have the inspector go out, the potential inspector. He goes out and he observes. He'll observe twice a day, 5 days a week, and he'll practice. He'll practice with the licensed home inspectors. It has to be a fully licensed home inspector. And eventually what happens is one day the home inspector will say to him, I want you to do the outside of the house with the client. The next day, do the outside in the basement. And it gets to the point where he says, why don't you do this one? Once he's done that first inspection, the state requirement is he does 25 inspections while being directly supervised by a licensed inspector. So take the course, pass the national test. It's a standard test that throughout the country, take it at a testing center. Practice. This is how we approach it. Practice until you're good enough to do it, and you do the 25. All that gets mailed in, and you become an associate home inspector. For 1 calendar year, at least 1 calendar year, and 100 inspections. Once you've done 100 inspections and it's been 1 calendar year, you submit the addresses, the information, and you become fully licensed. So it takes some time. It takes, by the time you're done, it's usually a couple of years before you're a fully licensed inspector if you wanted to be on your own, that type of thing. You may hear inspectors talk about it. When you're out there, 2 inspectors might show up. One might be in training. He might be observing. It's not unheard of. But that's the situation that you need to spend time with. And that's similar to, say, with lead paint. Yeah. There's a kind of a master and an apprentice type situation, a little different. We don't use the word apprentice. Generally, it's not a paid position. It's more of a student where they're learning about being a home inspector. Okay.
Cool.
Right. I know you guys don't want to be home inspectors, so I know you don't have questions about that. All right. What direction do we want to go now?
Well, I don't know what you want to lead with this, but my name's Sean Rizzo.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, that's okay. My name's Sean Rizzo. I'm one of the owners of Tiger Home Inspection. We are a family-owned business that started in Braintree, Mass. in my parents' basement. My folks founded the company. They've since retired. Now my brother, myself, run and operate the business. Mike Healy's been with us
since the basement.
Since the beginning. We call it since the basement. We have some guys that have been with us since the basement, meaning they started in the basement with us.
Yeah.
So we perform the home inspection, and where we sit in the sales cycle of the home is that you have your buyer finds a house, makes an offer, and within that offer is a satisfactory home inspection. Usually you have 10 business days in order to schedule that inspection. That's where you can call us or any other company. We're open from 8 in the morning till 10 at night, 7 days a week. Set up the inspection time. Usually the buyer, not usually, 99% of the time the buyer will be there. The buyer's representation, I mean the real estate agent. Usually we do not, I shouldn't say we do not want the seller to be there, but it's usually easier for us when the seller is not at the home, because we're about to go and inspect their home that they think is beautiful and wonderful, and we might be about to tell them that their baby has maybe some warts or pimples. And so, go ahead, please interject.
So, remember yesterday we were talking about the offer. So on page 2 of the offer is your home inspection contingency, roof to basement, soup to nuts. So that's what these gentlemen are here to talk about. And when you have an accepted offer, your next step will be a home inspection. So they can look up on the internet somebody to go to, or you can recommend a few different people. Then either they can make the phone call or you can. Can you just talk about the timing it takes and the gross living area of the house and things like that to determine the scheduling?
So, you call our office, we're open there for 10 at night. Usually, we'll pick a day that's convenient for the buyer, for yourself, and for the seller, so you get in there. And at that point, we want you to be there at the inspection. It's very important because it's key to be at the inspection because show and tell, as Mike always says, is a key part to the home inspection. It gives the best experience for the buyer. You can read a report all you want, but if you're doing an inspection, the buyer's going to be present. That's great because we can talk about whether it be the roof, the gutters, the downspouts, heating system, on and on it goes. We can actually discuss what we're seeing at the inspection.
And another thing about that, if for instance you book the inspection for 10 o'clock, I always try to get there for 9:30 because a lot of times the home inspector will get there early and usually he walks around the outside first. And I always like to be there to represent the home so that if somebody's going on the premises, I'm there.
Yeah. So to touch on that, that's a very good point. Our inspections are scheduled either 8:30, 12, and 3:30. Mike will tell you, Mike trains all our guys. If there's an 8:30 inspection, usually our inspectors will enter the neighborhood about 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And you may want to touch on, Mike, what's the key of entering into a neighborhood at 8 o'clock?
Well, I mean, just as the reason you're there is you know, as we all commuted this morning, is we don't know exactly how the traffic's going to be that day, so we all want to give ourselves that little extra, you know, cushion. We tell the inspectors you don't want to be before then. If people are getting ready for work, they're getting ready to go, the kid's going to go to school, they don't want someone, you know, lurking around in the yard. So what we shoot for is get there, you know, 8:15. Go up, knock on the door. Hi, you know, you're expecting an inspection? Yes, okay. I thought it was at 8:30. I'm going to be outside. I mean, do you mind if I walk around? Sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes no, whatever they want. And if it's okay, we'll start looking around a little outside, wait for everyone to show up. If not, we'll get back in the car and wait for the, you know, the listing broker, the selling broker, whoever wants to get up and, you know, kind of get it going. And once they do, we get going on the outside of the house.
And what I find too is getting there early is Mike has trained some of the guys. If you go into a neighborhood, the neighborhood's most likely built at the same time. So you can drive around the neighborhood and if you can see so-and-so, this neighborhood just replaced a roof or replaced their windows. Where does the house sit in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
You know, is there a river in the
especially with a subdivision.
Yeah, the subdivision. Yeah. Is there water nearby? Is it the bottom of the hill? Is it the top of the hill? What type of foliage, what type of trees are around the home? There's so much to learn about the neighborhood before you start inspecting on the home. And this is something you can tell your buyers as well when they're looking around. Don't always so focus on the house that's listed that you forget to look at the neighborhood and what other people have done to the homes within the neighborhood and what other pieces of landscape may be around the neighborhood.
Well, actually, I'm going to take a step back.
Yeah, please do.
So, with the inspection process, can kind of take it from my side. You know, we'll get back to the office in a moment. Is when I get my work for the next day. If I have a job, you know, and it's at, you know, Main Street, wherever. The first thing I do, and this is what's changed dramatically since I started this, is I go right to the old Google and I throw it in, and you know, you'll find out that it is on a main street, and there was a car that plowed into the front corner of it at one point, or there was a fire there, or there's been something that went on. So, because the internet never really goes away, I had an inspection. I was in Rhode Island actually, and he gave me the address. It was a friend of a friend, and I looked it up. It turns out it had been gutted. It had been gutted by fire and put back together, and he wasn't really aware of that. So it's not. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's broken, but it is good information. So first thing I do is just get right on the computer. I want to see what it looks like. I want to get an idea of what it's going to be, what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. But also, does anything come up as past incidents? On the way in, as Sean said, what I'm looking for a lot of rocky outcroppings. What does that mean? Increased chance of radon gas. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Radon gas. Soil with a high ledge and rock content. Not as much soil to absorb moisture. Sometimes it means you might have water in the basement, that type of thing. A lot of willow trees back in the 50s, early 60s. They used to,
great, though.
Behind the house.
All the water.
Yeah.
Yep, they used to plant them behind the house, and it would take all the water out. The only problem is they go right for your septic system,
That's what
your
I
sewer
thought.
pipes. So we'll go down another alley. I grew up in a Campanelli neighborhood. Anyone, are you familiar with them at all? It looks like a California subdivision. It's all those long, low ranches. And right after the war, this guy Campanelli, he built all over, he built as far south as Middleborough, and he really did a lot of work in Framingham. There's some gigantic ones there. But they all look the same, kind of that California ranch, straight O and an L. No basement. It's a slab. And this heat is in pipes on the floor, and the waste pipes are on the floor. And the weeping willow they planted in the backyard and that kind of stuff, everything's going to slow you down a little bit. The other thing is, I'd say the biggest variable is my client. The buyer, if you give me a good first-time home buyer with a solid engineering background and a father who knows it all,
ask him.
I could be there all day. All right?
So two things that I do, and everybody knows that I've been doing this 100 years, so I don't need to keep apologizing. But I will, in fairness to the home inspector, I will let him know if this is the first home they're purchasing. Because if it's their sixth home, you're like, it's not that you're going to not say things, but you're just going to speak to that person differently than if you're very first showing them where the main shutoff valve is or how to change a filter on a furnace. And the other thing is, and I'm sure you guys will say this, is even though the buyer and perhaps the buyer's father are going to follow around, the home inspector is at some point going to say, I need to regroup and get my notes down and stuff, and you have to allow them the respect to get that done so that they don't forget all the detailing of what they're doing too. So it's a process.
Yeah, and the thing is, for one of our biggest complaints as home inspectors, and we struggle as business owners, our complaints is the inspector took too long. You're right, and the inspection took long. It's the only business I feel sometimes in the world that you're frowned upon because you took you too long to do a thorough job. It's very bizarre, you know. And when we battle with that, and if it takes us X amount of time to do a good job,
so why
that's
don't
what it takes.
Lie to them ahead of time and tell them you're going to be 4 hours, and then if you're done earlier, you're the good guy.
That's the thing. So we did put this print here that I said, and it's Tiger's helpful hints streamline the home inspection. This would be great for the listing broker and or the buyer's broker. And I'm just going to read through some of these bullets if I could. It says, please be present for the entire inspection. Your assistance may be needed for the exterior portion of the inspection as well as the conclusion of the inspection. So please, as you were educated before, get there early. A lot of times what happens, we'll get there, the buyer will get there, will perform the exterior part of the inspection, and then the real estate agent or other professionals will show up and they'll say, okay, so can you go over the exterior with us again? Well, we just did the exterior, but now they want us to do it again, and if we don't do it again, somehow we're frowned upon. So that can save time. Please be on time. All common areas should be accessible. That happened, so now we're talking about when we get into the world of condos or condo apartments, sometimes there'll be a common utility area or a common boiler area.
Yeah.
And
Right.
well,
So can you
please.
stop and explain that again to brand new
ahead.
agents
Yeah.
that, for instance, crap that's in front of the furnace and stuff like that so that there's access. If the only crawl space is in the bedroom closet, which there still are. So
The attic access in particular.
So these are, and again, we all want to work well together, meaning the buyer agent and the seller agent, but if you just remind the listing agent, please make sure these things are accessible for the inspector. He should not be the one moving boxes of old school pictures to get at what he needs to inspect.
The classic with that is the access to the attic in a lot of ranches is in the master bedroom closet.
Mm-hmm.
So you put the ladder up, you carefully push it up.
After you move the pocketbooks and
Well,
the
actually, you get all the pocketbook and sweaters. Carefully push it up, and then all the cellulose insulation pours down on top of ladies' clothes. And then she sends us the dry cleaning bill.
Yeah.
That's happened more than once in our career.
Yeah, well, in the house that I just told you about with the lead in Chelmsford, the owner was the listing agent, and he said to me, and maybe this is a thing with the new way they're putting insulation in, he said to me, can you wait till the end of the inspection to go into the attic because it's loose and fluffy and I know it's going to fall down.
Yeah. what should happen is ideally, if it's cellulose is, it's actually shredded newspaper. It's shredded newsprint treated with a flame retardant and sometimes kind of like an insecticide. But it's mostly just a flame retardant. It's a good insulation, and what it is, they blow it in with a gun. It's kind of like gray confetti. They blow it in, it goes up high, it settles a little bit, but it still has a lot of loft. It's a good performing, there's two ways, they put it in dry and wet. But what happens is, ideally, when you have a scuttle, one of those openings in the closet, what they should do is they're supposed to put, whether it's plywood or luan, but they're supposed to put a form around that so that they can fill it 6, 9, 12 inches. They can fill up to that form so that when you open the hatch, it doesn't cascade in. Not all of the guys do that. So when you open it, it all kind of pours in on you, and then you got to get the vacuum and the whole 9 yards. But that's with cellulose, that's what it is like, if you do go into the attic, it is going to cling to your shoes and your pants. I'm not all that comfortable going into an attic with cellulose insulation because if there is flooring, you can't see it. If there's a lot of attics had flooring strips and they don't have it on the sides, you can't see it. So a lot of times we'll stick our head up, we'll look around, but it's inevitable that some of it's going to come back with you, and that's what the seller had requested. If it was his house, he could have had the vacuum right there. Usually, if it gets on me, I'll go outside and just brush it off right away. I mean, there's nothing wrong. It's really just shredded newspaper, but no one likes a mess.
And also, access, all common areas should be accessible. That also speaks to
condos. Whole different thing. So, condominiums. I've been at this. I've been at it not the beginning of home inspection, but home inspection was young when I started. And when I first started, when you went to a condo, a lot of times you'd say, so are there any common areas? The broker would say to you, well, those are the common areas. You're just inspecting the unit. And, it was kind of, well, I get that. But over time what's happened is, as the consumer has become more educated, it became, this is a six townhouses as a condo association, but I'd like to get into that area because I own 1/6 of the repairs.
Yeah.
And that's the key, is you own whatever portion you're paying, you own that portion of the repairs. I remember being chewed out, it was a townhouses in a U shape. This unit, the roof was wonderful. Well, if you get enough roof, they face all 360 degrees basically. One side's going to get weathered faster than another. And I pointed out to my client, I said, the roof on your unit looks good, but you can see this one with the sun exposure, this is a southwest exposure, you've really got advanced wear. And the broker was, that's not their unit, I said, he pays 1/12 regardless of what building it is, because they had said that it's treated as one unit. I don't read the condo docs. I don't think you read the condo docs like that. You're not looking to define whose responsibilities, that kind of stuff. But that's where it all is. It's the condo docs. So what happens is, condominiums, we go in, we do, as home inspectors, we generally want to see if, especially if it's an apartment type building, a high rise, we want to see the electric closet. It's usually on the floor or every other floor. We want to see the electric meter for our unit that we're looking at and the main shutoff. We want to try to see the plumbing, what we can. If there's a parking spot, we're not going to inspect the whole underground garage. That's an engineering study. But we'll go and take a look at the parking spot and see if this appears to be leaking from above, if there's something that could affect the car. We just want to look. Laundry room, we'll take a look around, see if it's doing what they're supposed to. We go into a common boiler room. We don't want to see if they have paint cans and flammables in there. We want to go in and have it look like, a Navy boiler room. We want it to be kind of clear of stuff, properly labeled. Again, I could spend hours in a commercial boiler room. It could be an engineering study. We're looking for more how things are run. Does it look like things are ship-shape? And that's what so common areas. Frequently we'll get there and, do we have access to the roof today? Flat roof building?
I'm glad you mentioned the roof.
And
do you have problems getting the common boiler areas and the roofs and all that?
Yes, we do.
Because a listing broker, someone hasn't educated the maintenance gentleman that said, we're doing a home inspection this day, we're going to need access to the roof and to the common boiler.
I'll give you a good example, the Brook House in Brooklyn. Giant complex. And they are very fair about it, but what they tell you is, our guy goes home at 3, I think it's 3 or 3:30, 3:30 I think. Our guy's off the clock, so no one tells the buyers that. They book the inspection at 3:30, we get there and they're like, oh, you just missed it.
Says the buyer rough then.
Well, the buyer can be, sometimes they're a little chafed at that. They want to know how come no one told me.
Right.
do you want me to come back to look at the roof? You know, or sometimes they get all the information they can from the association. A lot of times a lot of the smaller buildings, what'll happen is, there'll be an association, there might be a member of the board, you know, the board that's in the building. There is a way to get in, but no one's really done the legwork. I'm just gonna say, sometimes with the listings, people they'll go, oh, it's so hard to get in touch with them. Well, there's been no effort. Right a lot of times in the lobby it says management company, phone number, and what I'll do as a home inspector is I'll say, look, we're gonna continue with our inspection, why don't we see if you can get me in? You know, it's just, our feeling is this, we're there now, we're gonna try to get it done. I don't wanna have to come back next week and slow your process down. And it's not up to me, it's gonna be up to the buyer. There's some buyers who really want to get their money's worth, and I get it, and I appreciate it. It's a consumer protection law, it's a process for them to be educated. They want that information, you know?
They understand that, you'll be liable for roof repairs.
Yeah. And it's, you know, the ones that are really tricky, say in Boston, South End, that kind of stuff, you get a brownstone, so the original structure is quite old, late 1800s. Sectional flat roof, some pitched roof. And you have to get through at 8:30 in the morning. You got to go upstairs, and if they're not up for work, people that are having breakfast, up to this, and then the skylight. You have the steer, and you go to the deck and check it out. I'll say, South End was my favorite place to do inspections. Always was, because the brokers are part of the community, and everyone gets it. The guy on the top floor knows that if you want to see the basement, then you got to be friends with the guy in the basement if he wants to see the top floor.
And I used to do fire escape inspections.
Did you really?
Yes.
Oof. That's when we were young and foolish. I used to go on the fire escapes to get on the roof. I put my ladder up, and it used to be. Now the inspections now are a little more uniform, but when I first started, Bill Delaney, one of the other supervisors, he almost went through on a fire escape. It went out, it crumbled under his feet, and they're better inspected now, but for a long time, especially the South End, before it fully transitioned, fully gentrified, there was some scary stuff. It was very scary. But what did I like about working there? The brokers made it easy. It was the brokers who made it easy. They let the new people upstairs, this unit's on the market, and there might be 5 units in this townhouse. You know it's on the market, we're going to need access. I'm sorry, you got the deck, you got the view, but with it comes a responsibility. And that's what they'd do. We'd get there, they'd say, you better be there by 8:30 because he has to leave for work. I'd make sure I get there at 8. I'd get a look at it. If I had to get a look at it, I'd always hope the buyer was there, but we'd get it done. And it was really, the brokers made it happen. And what you found is that when all those little details were taken care of, it all went into place faster. It didn't take, the deal just went so much more smoothly.
And then, so as we originally spoke, was shorten this time of the home inspection. Another one I like to speak to briefly is pets. So certainly, if you have a buyer and you know the home inspection is going to be that day, pets, because everybody will say that little Rover is friendly. He's never bit anybody until there's foreign, strange people in his house and the owners aren't around. Little Rover isn't so friendly, and/or God forbid, if we open a door and whether it be a cat or a dog that shouldn't get out, gets out.
Cats are much harder to catch.
Yeah, but those dogs aren't always so friendly. So dogs should be put in the right spot, and/or cats or what other animals. It becomes an issue because the world today, dogs seem more popular than ever. So everybody has a dog now. So beware of what's happening with the dogs, because trust me, when that dog goes out the front door, everybody wants to blame the home inspection.
I've only been bitten.
We've done that a few times, chasing dogs through neighborhoods.
Only been bitten by the small dogs. As much as the person told me, oh, don't worry, it's a wonderful dog, don't worry. It literally jumped up and got me in the backside, jumped up. And it's never really had trouble. The big dogs, everyone's on their toes. It's the little dogs that get you, and they're quick.
And the next thing is to make sure that all light bulbs are working in basements. Just makes the inspector be able to move along.
Throughout the house?
Throughout the house, light bulbs. Because what happens, we hit a switch, light bulb doesn't go on. Okay, well, is the light not working because it's not a light bulb, or because the switch is broken, there's an electrical problem? So light bulbs, as simple as it may sound, are very important to make sure that they all work.
We're not completely against, what happens is we end up, someone will go and grab a bulb out of this socket, put it in that socket, and then back to this socket, to the other socket. What we run into is basements in cathedral ceilings. Cathedral ceilings, sometimes the reason the bulbs are out is because they're kind of hard to change. The light switch goes, and we say, well, it probably is the bulb. And the buyer says, but how do we know? And then in my early in my career, when I was young and silly and people pleaser to that degree, we'd try to get the ladder, the this, the that, and see if they have the thing. What we say now is, look, it's very simple. If we have more than a couple of these, just make sure that at your walkthrough all the bulbs work. Just tell them, we had a number of bulbs that were out. Just make sure things work, because as a listing broker, if you took care, I tell all the time when people ask us, look, if you take care of all the little stuff, any of the big stuff that comes up seems so much smaller. It's if everything does what it's supposed to. If you go to use the jacuzzi and it turns out that the breaker in the panel in the basement is on rather than off, if the bulbs all work, you know where all the thermostats are and what they control. That's a home inspector pet peeve. The listing broker, we go to a McMansion, it's got 8 zones. Nobody knows what turns on what. So we have to turn one on and then find out what baseboards gets warm, which ones are warm, which are cool. Turn the next one on, because we have had circumstances where you go into a house, you inspect it, in one room never got hooked up. Or it's recently they had a burst pipe and it's been dead-ended. So, you need to know.
Yeah, we touched on a lot of things. Items blocking access to HVAC equipment, we spoke to that. Unlocked areas must be inspected, we spoke of that. Be sure the attic has easy access, we spoke of that. Reasonable access. Repair broken and missing items such as doorknobs, locks, latches, window panes, screens, gutters, downspouts, and chimney caps. Just little things like that. If those are fixed, it makes, as Mike said, the big picture seem so much better. And in the winter months, which is always very difficult in New England, is when and if possible, clear snow away from walkways, driveways, and decks. I know it's very difficult. Snow comes here quickly in a lot of it, but it's very difficult when we have to go do an inspection, and the snow on the driveway, the snow on the roof, the snow on the walk, and the snow on the deck. And Mike, you want to articulate what happens in that scenario when we go to a home that is snow's covered with, the roof is covered with snow.
Well, I'll go back to at the peak of the foreclosure problem that we had a number of years ago. The big problem was no one lived in the house, so nothing was cleared. And we'd get a call, and we'd show up at the house, and there was no driveway to park in, and you'd be on a fairly busy street. So where do you put your car or truck? You have to get over the snowbank into the driveway that's not shoveled. You have to get up the walk. I mean, there's been times when we've had to help clients get into the house. Then you have to work your way around. We have guys in the northern tier from central Mass up to New Hampshire, southern New Hampshire. They carry snowshoes. They have, because you want to get around the house. Once you get a couple of feet of snow on the ground, it is it's a real hassle. So what happens is, we're always hoping that everything possible is clear. Love it if the driveway, just so you can park, steers, that type of thing. If you can see the deck, it saves a lot of questions. The way that we approach it at Tiger is, we go to a house and the roof is snow covered. I had a person from England. He said to me, "So, are you going to shovel the roof?" I said, "No, I'm not going to shovel the roof." "Well, how are we going to see the roof?" I said, "You're not going to see the roof." And what happens in New England is you might close and never see your roof. We've had a couple of winters where there's enough snow on the roof that it was snow covered for a month. Especially with the right exposure.
So how does the buyer understand your judgment if you report impedance?
So what happens, if I can see a portion of the roof, we'll talk about that. But I'll tell them, we want to see the whole roof. That's the key, because different exposures age in different ways. We've had houses where the front roof has been done, but the back roof's old. So you want to see the whole roof. The buyer, really, if you're going to buy a house during the winter, that's one of the risks. I mean, there's no easy answer. People still say, "So what are we going to do?" And I say, well, that's the thing. You're buying in New England during the winter. The way that we handle it is, most people, if they're looking to make an offer on a house, they might drive by with their friends, say, "Oh, that's the house, take a look." Or they might, "Can we stop and get measurements?" Or, "We want to just take another look." We tell them, what happens is this: snow on the roof when we're there, call us when it's clear. If you want to meet us, we'd charge you for an appointment, not a full appointment, but we'd charge you to come, take a look, and go over it. If you leave it up to us, what our guys will do is they kind of keep a log of the roofs they haven't seen. If they're in the area, they'll come by, and if the roof's clear, they'll take a look and document it. So that's, we'll do that, no charge. But what happens is they have to make sure that the roof is clear. A lot of times they'll go, the front is clear, we show up the back, still snow, it's a north-south exposure. The north side doesn't lose snow for weeks. so we can't see that whole roof. So the key is we'll try to do what we can for them. We'll try to do it as cheaply as we can for them. But there is a chance they might not see the roof before we've had people, they've moved in and haven't seen the roof for weeks.
And that's what we'll just pass on to speak with your real estate agents and or attorney.
Yeah.
We just tell you what we can't see and right, stay in your lane. I think that's part of real estate home inspector. We just try to stay in our lane and let the real estate agents handle that.
I'll give you central air conditioning as another one.
I was just going to ask about that.
We can't, during the winter, there is really not even winter. What's supposed to happen is, with central air conditioning, residential central air conditioning, you've got the compressor outside next to the house, and inside is an evaporator, kind of like a car radiator, inside the fan box. It's supposed to be 65 degrees or more for at least 24 hours. That's included the night, through the night. And the reason is there's an oil bath in the bottom of that, and if the oil bath doesn't come up to temperature, it can be thickened, and the unit, when you start it, you can damage it. So what happens is we generally don't run air conditioning until we're solidly into the spring, because it hasn't been warm enough. And in the fall, if we get a couple of nights that are 40 degrees, 40 degrees, 40 degrees, we start to become concerned. So with air conditioning, central air conditioning, summertime in the shoulders, spring and fall, you'll be able to turn it on, run it. But the rest of the year, which in New England is the majority of the year, we're probably not going to do anything with it. We're going to take a look at the physical components. We're going to look at the electric shut-off, the pad, the compressor, the insulation of the lines. We're going to look at the condensate equipment, on the air handler, but we're not going to run it. So a lot of people, they'll say, so how do I know? And there really isn't a way, to tell. It's New England. It's too cold, and when it's, we'll have 55 degrees, and say, oh, I just had it on yesterday. We'd had one of those warm days. The problem is, even if I ran it on a 60-degree day, it's not really working. It's not that hard for an air conditioner to perform on a 60-degree day. It's easy for it to dispose of that heat outside, because outside isn't 90. So it's not a realistic evaluation anyways. It'll give you a false sense of security if anything else. So, okay.
And then, of course, just a real simple one is if you're going to have cars removed from a garage.
Yeah.
This makes it so much easier, so much quicker. We're not working around the garage, especially a lot of people have
fancy cars,
covered cars. And,
scratched it.
Yeah, we scratched
it with your flashlight.
We've had that conversation before too, which our inspector says, never even went near this guy's car. How could I scratch it?
I like that.
So if cars can be removed from garage, it really makes a difference. And it also gives a better feel for the buyer of how much space they have.
Yep.
Right? You're trying to sell, it makes it feel bigger. So remove the vehicles.
When you talk about slabs, when you've got the workings of the house sometimes in the garage or in a room off the garage. So
The Campanellis, they usually put the boiler rooms either accessed from the outside, it's a long skinny closet, or you go through the garage, and you need to have proper access. We've had cases where the car's parked up right against the closet door. You can't open it. And that's, a lot of it's common sense. I do think that if in my dream world, if I was a listing broker, I'd like to go over there and just kind of take a look and pretend in my mind to run through the inspection, to imagine the situations that might arise. Because there's a lot of simple things, and again, the smoother the inspection goes, I don't just mean everything's good. The less, if I don't have to get the other end of something and help move it with the broker so we get there, the smoother it goes, just the better feeling the buyer gets.
Yeah, the whole process makes everyone feel better and more comfortable.
Yeah.
So as long as you're talking about Campanelli, can you talk about the furnace in the kitchen?
Okay, so I grew up in a Campanelli. And
near and dear to his heart.
Yeah,
and was your first inspection.
Yes, and the refrigerator that was part of the kitchen cabinets.
Not a lot of people know about that. The house that I grew up in, when I was about 11 years old, we bought my grandmother's house. She was the original owner, and this guy Campanelli, what he used to do is he'd come in, he basically strip mined. He just took everything down and made a big open, there was a big open area, hillside location. He terraced it, and it looks just like when you see, California neighborhoods, vintage California neighborhoods. And what he did was he used the same formula that the people that started was the Levitts. It was called Levittown down in New York, New Jersey. They were the first to use this format. And what it is, you pour the slab, and in the slab, copper pipes for heat. It's like a hockey rink in reverse. They have the waste and the supply plumbing. The electrical runs through the structure in a conventional fashion. They pour the slab. They build the house so you have no basement. and the slab is warm. We loved it. Now, you don't have a basement, so where do you put the boiler? The boiler's in the kitchen, and it's oil fired.
Fuel tanks, or were they mostly
In the
covered?
garage. No, no, most of the time there was a back hall or a garage, that type of thing. They didn't usually put them outside. The problem, if you've been in a house with oil heat, when it comes on, you know it comes on. If we grew up there, so we'd have friends over who didn't know, and also would go on and they'd be, you know, and we just didn't, it's like people who live in East Boston up at the airport. They just stop talking when the jet goes over, and then they start talking again as soon as it's done. We don't, you know, we didn't think anything of it. What we loved it for, and it is stainless steel, the company was York. The company that they used was
It
York.
looked like a chest freezer.
Yep, it had a stainless steel top and a back, and it had a enamel, pink enamel, generally pink, sometimes blue, pink enameled surround, the York symbol. But it was the place where, when you came in from sledding and playing in the snow, you put your gloves, you'd put anything on it you wanted to dry. If you want to keep something slightly warm, you'd put it there, and it's where the cat always wanted to sleep. You know what I mean? So we were fine. We actually thought it was a pretty good thing. The problem is this. The copper pipes run through the concrete. The concrete runs through the floor. Copper and concrete, unless it's the concrete's configured properly, they don't get along. So eventually, the copper pipes start to pit and they start to leak. So in the 70s, slate was a very popular floor material, and with radiant floor heating, it was a good thing because it was a good transmitter. So we had, you know, the family friend Russell, he came and laid a nice, my mother's dream floor. We had concrete for about a year and a half until we could get it, a slate floor. Now, the work he did on the slate floor, chipping up the old floor, which were 9x9 tiles, we'll talk about that later, potential for asbestos content. He chipped it up, and the installation of the slate floor must have disturbed something, because a couple weeks later, a little damp spot showed up. Knocked it up. It came back, and then when Russell came over with his jackhammer the new slate floor, my mother cried. Because that was the only way to fix. You had to open it up, find the leaking pipe, and then put a new piece of pipe and then pour it and reinstall the floor. Oh. The other thing as a home inspector we look for is anytime it's not the summer, if you know it's early spring or late fall, and there's a patch of nice green grass next to the house, it's because one of the pipes is gently leaking and keeping it warm and moist. So there's a lot of different things that go on with these campanellis. But the big one is, because the pipes are in the slab, eventually there's going to be an issue. When my mother sold that house, it still had the slab heat and the boiler in the kitchen. A lot of them did move the boiler out to the garage if they could. The big response, usually what they do is they may keep the boiler where it is, they may move the boiler, but they'll end up putting baseboard in.
Do you all understand what slab means?
No basement. It's just a concrete pad.
Okay.
They call it a slab, monolithic slab. So it's just a concrete pad. So they put all the pipes down, and then they pour the concrete, and there's no basement. There's nothing underneath it. Now, the other thing that is very beneficial is it's very helpful for termites. Okay?
Oh, yes.
Termites in Massachusetts, because of the level we're at, we do not have Formosan termites. If you go down to New Orleans, Florida, Texas, you have the termites that live in the wood. And the reason they can do that is because year-round it never becomes freezing. So they can eat you out of house and home. In this part of the world, we have subterranean termites. October to March, they basically stay in their nest. Their nest is below the frost line, about 4 feet down, and they're less active. The only time they're active is we can supply them with two things: warmth and moisture. So with a campanelli, always a chronic problem. Because this big slab is heated, it kept the dirt warm, so the termites could work year-round.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Fire away.
So one of the things that the home inspectors will talk about is how far down, let's say it's a cedar shingle house, which termites would love, I guess.
Yeah.
How far down toward the ground your siding comes. But in the slabs, wouldn't that come closer to the ground?
Generally it did. Usually there was probably a 4 to 6 inch gap, and that was another reason. But I got to tell you, the termites wouldn't waste their time building outside tubes. Now, termites. We're going to have to kind of go off a branch right now.
That's a good segue, though. We can go right into workworm infestation.
What happens with termites? Termites don't live in the house. They live in the soil.
I love this little.
They're below the frost lines. They're about 4 feet down. They have a nest. The queen is there. Her job is to lay eggs. they have the workers and they have the soldiers. And what happens is, they're below the frost line, they have tunnels, and what they do is they seek out wood, and when they find it, they take it, they process it, and bring it, and they do everything. They grow yeast with it, and that's what they eat. They build with it, they eat the wood, and then they excrete their building material. And what termites do is they build mud tubes. So on the side of a foundation, you might see this, it looks like you took a handful of sand at the beach and kind of built a little tower out of it. You might see this little bit of mud going up the side of the house. They're building a tunnel. And why do they have the tunnel? The two things termites hate are bright light and dry air. They like darkness and dampness. So when they build that tunnel, they're bringing the dampness up from below. And scientists have studied the way they build their tunnels. As they go back and forth, it actually ventilates it, and it brings that moist air up from below. So they get the damp air up to where they're doing their work, and it keeps it nice and dark. So with termites, you'll hear home inspectors go on and on all the time. We love when you have your grading and you have a certain amount of exposed foundation before you get to the sill of the structure. And the reason is, every inch, it's an exponential increase in risk. As you bring the house closer and closer to the soil, it increases dramatically the chances you'll have termites, because their commute is shorter. We do not know how they know that there's wood up there, because they live in the dark, or they stay in the dark, but they know. They will build stalagmites and stalactites. I looked under a mobile home once. I took the panel down and I looked, and what happens is, rather than having to build their tunnel over to the edge, then go up the side, and then they ate the wood all the way to the middle. At one point, we don't know how they know, they said, why not make a shortcut? They actually start building from below, and they meet. And now they have a shortcut. So they're amazing creatures. So with a campanelli, what happens is, you've got this pad, it's got heat. All the other termites have to go kind of reduce their activity, not these guys. The ground stays nice and warm because the heat's in the pad. If you have any kind of leak in your bathtub or your sink, where in most campanellis, in the wet wall, the wall behind the tub and the sink, there's a small patch of dirt that he used to leave open. And that's where the termites love to come. So they have the heat, they have that. How do you treat for termites? There's two ways. There's chemical treatment, and then there's bait stations. The chemical treatment is the older, more traditional method. And what would happen is, they call it trench and drench. They dig a trench around the house, and they take the chemical, they mix it with water, dilute it to the recommended strength, and they pour it along the side of the house. My grandmother remembers when they first built the houses, it was like a neighborhood party. The Ersteins next door, the other people, they got together, and when the houses were new, they picked all the rocks and debris. They made sure there was no wooden debris around the house. This was after construction. And then they all poured chloridane, the stuff that's outlawed now. They poured it all the way around the house. It was a great pesticide. It has a half-life of 50 years. It stays active for years and years. But it turns out it wasn't really good for anyone, except for killing termites. So my grandmother, I remember her talking about that. The neighbors all would get together, and that, because the houses were brand new, they'd make sure things were good, and they knew how close they were, and that's what they'd do. So with chemical treatment, if you have a conventional house with a basement, they'll go around the perimeter. Any place you have a driveway or a walkway, they'll drill holes, they'll pound a rod in, take it out, they put a tube in, and they pour the chemical in to get it underneath the hard surfaces. Then we go into the basement, we go down the stairs, and you'll see little drill holes in the floor about 9 to 12 inches apart all the way around.
So you're out there and you see a house and you see drill holes in a traditional basement?
That's what it is.
That's what it is.
And they're regularly spaced all the way around. It was what they do.
And once you see it once when you're in a home inspection,
Yep.
and one is, you'll forever, when you go to the next house, you're like, I've seen that before, I know what that is. Seriously, you will, once you see it once.
They call it rodding in RODDI, so they use the rod. They pound the rod in, they take it out, and then they put the tube in and they inject it, and it's almost like a foaming agent. But what it does is it creates a chemical barrier on the outside and a chemical barrier on the inside. Any termites in the house at that time can't really get away, they die, and it prevents access to the structure in the future. Chemical treatments generally are effective. They can be affected by ledge if there's stone under the house. If you have a sump pump and you're pulling water from under the house, so the water that would have went into the basement, that can dilute the effect. There can be times when it isn't applied properly, it doesn't do what it should. The way the regulations are written are you're allowed to do a chemical treatment and you are not allowed to treat again for, I think, 15 years unless there's activity. Because they don't want unscrupulous exterminators going to some old person's house and putting chemicals in the ground over and over and over. So the traditional treatment for termite was a chemical treatment. And then about 15, maybe 20 years, 20 years. About 20 years ago, Dow came up with this new, it was called Centricon. And these are bait stations. If you've been to a house and you see these little green plastic circles, they're on the outside of the house. They're about
Some on the outside of offices or something. A lot of times.
Wherever there's a treatment, they're so many feet apart, but they go all the way around the house. And what that is, it's a completely different approach. Instead of creating a chemical barrier under the house, now what's the problem with the chemical barrier? Well, a lot of people today just don't want chemicals in their lives. Okay, let's say you're in a campanelli, you're in a ranch with the slab with the heat in the floor. You start drilling through, you're going to hit the pipes. You're going to put a hole in the pipes. Later on, Campanelli, in his final cost-saving things, he started to put forced hot air into the slab. And he put the ductwork in the slabs. So instead of pipes, he had ductwork. Well, they had cases where exterminators came and filled the ductwork with chemicals because they didn't know they were shooting into a duct. So that was another. So there's all sorts of things with the slabs. You got to be careful. So chemical treatment's one thing. Bait stations, they place these regularly spaced around the house, and they have a cover. You undo it, and there's a cylinder. And say this is a piece of wood. What would happen is you put this piece of pine in there and put the cover back on. You do this all the way around the house. Well, eventually the termites find the wood, they go to it, they start to eat it. As an exterminator, you come, usually during the regular season, you come once a month. You take it, you take a look. They found it. You gently shake them off. You don't want to disturb them, because if you really go at it and disturb it, and what they do is they send a pheromone, they'll run back down, they leave a trail, they leave a message, and it tells them don't go to this tunnel anymore. It's bad news. They'll send some of the soldiers up, and they're termites with these big giant jaws. So they'll come up and guard the entrance that you broke. It's a whole crazy thing. So
psychology of termites.
Oh, it's crazy. And
they're quite a thing.
Sometimes you little mud tube. You break the mud tube, and then about a minute later, all of a sudden you'll see, because termites look like rice with legs, but the soldiers have these big mandibles. All of a sudden you'll see them right at the opening because they think they're being attacked. Everyone loves termites. It's like chicken. You know how everyone loves chicken? Everyone loves termites. Birds like to eat them. Other carpenter ants like to eat them. Everyone, all the other ants, everyone wants to eat termites. So when they're under attack, that's what they do. That's how they respond. So with the bait station, what happens is they put the bait, this wood in. The day they find they have termites, they shake them off, and then they take this packet. They take out chemical. It's a little chemical stick. They put the stick in. It's bait, and they close it. Now the termites feed on that. And they take it back to the nest, and it wipes out the nest. Now, in a lot of ways, that bait station is a much better system. You don't have chemicals all over. Definitely you're targeting the nest, not just the termites that are at the house. The problem is, the reason why exterminators love the bait system is they're not driving around with tanks full of chemicals anymore. They're driving around with these little plastic containers, little stacks of wood, and these cellophane things with the bait in it. So their life is easier, much easier. The other thing is, the day you stop having them maintain those bait stations is the day they don't work anymore. Because what happens is, we've been to inspections where they didn't pay the guy, and he didn't come back and take his little plastic bait stations. You go and look, they've eaten all of the wood out of it. It's full of termite mud, because that's what they build with. They've eaten that, they've moved on, they've eaten all of the bait station bait, and they're still going because the technician isn't servicing it anymore. So, to break it down, chemical treatment is pretty much, once it's installed, if it's done right, it starts working right away, and it's good for, it's good until years from now when it starts to break down. Bait stations, people like them because they're a little greener. Exterminators like them because it's a lifetime relationship. You can pay for college and a boat with it. Okay? The downside with bait stations, you have to wait for the termites to find them. You put them in the ground, there's no assurance that they're going to find it and they're going to like it. The numbers, I belong to NEPMA, New England Pest Management Association, in our training. There's been anecdotal evidence that up to 20% of the bait stations don't work. So what happens is, you might put those bait stations in, But if they're happy eating your house, they might just keep eating the house. They have to eventually come around to thinking that they might want to try a little different taste. All right?
And termites is probably one of the #1 things that the seller of the home doesn't even know they have, because you don't see them.
Yeah.
So someone can be living in a house for 30, 40 years, and they won't even know that they have them because you don't see them, unlike the carpenter ant. Someone see carpenter ant, you see them run across your kitchen floor, we have ants. But the termite, a lot of times,
because
like the Healy family who was at Campanelli,
Yep.
lived there for 40 years.
So what happened with that, because they hate daylight and dry air, my mother
That's right.
was, we had all moved out, and then moved back, and then moved out. And my mother was going to put the house on the market. I took a look, and I found there was termite activity. I fixed it, but I went over regularly and looked and looked and looked. And a friend of my younger brother's ended up buying the house. He was an electrician. He was doing a lot of work on it. He got a portion of it. And he called. He said to my brother, "Look, you got to come over here. You got to see this." That's why he goes, "You should see the termite damage." So we let go. No, he's going to sue us. So we go over and look. And this happens with slab ranches all the time. They come up, and all it takes is a crack in the concrete. They can come through almost a microscopic crack. They'd come up through the crack into the stud. They'd eaten up the stud into the ceiling. And then they'd eaten across the ceiling and ate the joisting. So when he gutted this place, there was termite damage everywhere. Now, we had had a treatment. I lived there and didn't find them. And it's just really, really hard with the slab ranch to defend yourself against the termites. So you just have to be on your toes. Now, when do you find out you have termites? Once a year, roughly once a year in the springtime. This sounds kind of hokey, but usually it's on a warm morning after a rain. Okay? So what happens, I don't know if you've ever been out in the, you go out, it's like late spring. It's one of those warm, humid mornings. You go out, and you're like, geez, what is this? And there's big ants flying around everywhere. And what happens, ants, termites, street ants, carpenter ants, they all kind of do the same thing at the same time. That's the best time for them to try to spread the good word. So what happens is this. You have a termite nest in the ground. They've been eating your house for years. You don't know it. When the nest reaches a certain capacity, it goes through a change where it basically says, we're going to split, we're going to spend others to start a new colony elsewhere. So what happens is a large portion of the termites start to go through a change. Before, where they looked like a piece of rice with legs, they have no real skeleton, exoskeleton. They start to look like ants. They start to grow black outside, they get an exoskeleton, and they start to grow wings. And what they do is more and more of them make this change, and they start to fill the mud tubes. And then on the right morning, usually after some rain, it's a warm, moist day, they break out and they just start flying.
And then Tiger Home Inspection phone starts ringing.
It's like that.
You didn't tell us we had termites.
And the thing is, they start flying, and they're terrible flyers, so they fly wherever they can. Wherever they crash and their wings fall off is where they try to set up. They try to set up business. So let's say that you're a termite, you're not that bright.
Actually,
You come up out of your tube, I think you're instinctual.
Yeah.
So you come up and you start flying around. Little do you know you're inside the basement. And where are the two places they go? If it's daylight, they all swarm to the windows because they're trying to get out. As night falls and it gets dark, they move away from the windows, they move towards the boiler because it's warm.
That's right.
So what we look for, especially if you go into a house where there's some older people who've been there, they don't go downstairs much. We go downstairs, I've gone down, and around the boiler, there's a coating of wings. Because what happens is when they finally die, all the other insects, again, who likes termites? Everyone likes termites.
Spiders.
So when they die, all the other insects come, they eat the bodies, but they leave the wings. The wings have no nutrition. So you'll go into a house, and around the boiler in a halo, you'll go, whew, and the wings will just float around. And that tells you that there's an established nest. It's been here long enough to swarm. They recently swarmed, and that you need a treatment. And we need to try to find out if there's damage. Okay? The other thing we do, always look in spider webs. They swarm towards the window. Most spiders tend to set up around windows because of the light. And you'll look, and the thing will be full of termite swarmers, dead, or the wings, and you know that, again, you had a swarm. The trick with this, I did a house. It was tenants. It was built on grade. Had a little tiny crawl space that no one could get underneath it. And they said, every spring we get these ants, and we spray them. And, we usually kill them. And then, but every spring it happens. And they're mistaking it. What they're thinking is that we have these ants, we sprayed them and killed them. It's not. The place has termites, and they swarm. The swarm is over, and they don't come back till next year. So there's an established nest there.
So could we segue backwards a minute and go over the plan of how you do a home inspection?
Yes.
After you've done the outside, how you approach the inside, the different sections of it, so just so they understand.
I'll start just at the exterior, just kind of wrap it up from there. So we've got there, we've all, shaken hands, the seller knows we're here, the buyers are there, everyone's there, let's get going.
Father-in-law that knows everything, a friend that's the best contractor in the world.
Yep, the experts.
So we're going to herd cats.
Yep, we're going to herd off. So we work our way, usually you start off, and again, different inspectors may have slightly different approaches, but they're very similar. I expect to do 2 laps around the house if it's an average size house. First off, down low. I'm looking at sill height, basement windows, any trim, just like you talked about, how close does the siding get. I'll get my fingers up underneath that siding regularly to make sure I don't get a handful of sawdust or mud, which would be termites, carpenter ants, leaks. Work my way around, gets me looking at the foundation, look at the grading, the landscaping, the bushes, how close they are. Work our way around down low, step back, roof, gutters, chimney, sidewall, windows, what's going on, second time around. If it's a big house, or it's really involved, or there are any particular conditions, might end up going around again. I probably went around already when I got there and no one was there. The seller said I could walk around. I probably went around and took a good look. We do 2 things. We want the micro and the macro. First, I'll start off from far away, and you're looking to see that the house just looks plumb. Make sure it looks level. Make sure the chimney doesn't look like it's moving off. I mean, I've done houses in East Boston, this house, it's out about 1.5 feet, the whole house. So we look to see first, does the whole house look plumb and level? Then we zoom in on the different feet, and that's when we start to look more closely. So there's the macro and the micro. You're close and from a distance. We work our way around to the outside. I'm going to turn to you, say you're the buyer, I'm going to say, look, any questions on the exterior? Good. I'm going to stop, I'm going to put this information into my computer, and then we'll get going to the basement. This is when you can poke around, as the client. You can poke around, you can take measurements, you can, dream about your furniture, do whatever you like. But there's going to be a couple of minutes, probably 15 minutes, 20 minutes at worst. And I put my information in. We're going to head down to the basement next. Down to the basement, I'm going to start probing just like I did from the outside. I'm trying to find out if there insect or moisture damage to any of that structure on the top of the foundation. I'm going to start off at the basement, at the top of the foundation, whether it's concrete, brick, stone, whatever it is. I'm going to start probing that sill with my probe. What it does, it slows me down so I get a good look at the foundation, but I'm also checking all of the structure as I go around.
The probe is it looks like a huge screwdriver. It's a poker.
Yep. Different guys have different, there's been times we can tell who's been here by the mark his probe left. One guy had this crazy thing that left kind of a cross. So what it is, some guys use screwdrivers, some guys make their own out of other things, but you need something long enough to get into those tight spots. Most of us have a longer probe if there's a real long stretch, but the key is you just want to sound. The wood, when wood's solid, it has a very, regular sound, and then all of a sudden you'll hit it and it'll start to make a different pitch. Even if we don't get penetration, we can tell there's something going on there. The other thing we look for is the structure. A lot of times, if the outside of the house, the sill is what the whole house rests on top of the foundation. Moisture damage from the outside, it'll start to rotate because as that wood is broken down and leaves, it rolls over. So we're working our way around. We're looking at the sill, the joisting, the subflooring, all the structural, the ribs, the backbone, everything we can, the girder. As we do that, I'll come across the water main in. We'll take a look at the main coming in from the street, the meter, the shutoffs, if there's electrical grounding taking place there, which is where it's required. Waste lines out. So as I move along, as I come across different items, I'll take a look at them. So the things we look at is water in, plumbing in, potable water, water main, what kind of pipes, what condition they're in, are they properly installed? Waste lines out, what's material, any sign of leakage, so water in, water out, heat, is it a boiler, water, furnace, hot air, what's the fuel, oil, gas, so water in, water out, heat, hot water, the hot water tank, where does it come from, and then the electric.
Plumbing's always interesting because a lot of homeowners think that plumbing.
They're not afraid.
They're not afraid of plumbing.
They stay away from electricity generally because
people know that they can.
You can die more readily. Plumbing can get you too, but it's just usually trickier.
A lot of plumbers out there.
Yeah, a lot of plumbers. yeah, a lot of unusual installations. So as we work our way through that basement, We want to take a look at the structure as a whole. We're looking for signs of water entry, water penetration. Always the question, does the basement get water?
Is it bad that I have a sump pump? That's another.
What does your father say? That's your
Well,
yeah.
back to my house. We
Exactly.
grew up with a sump pump.
Exactly. So it's not.
So that's all I know. So it's not a big deal to me.
Again, if a buyer asks you that, remember that it's hard not to say anything, but you don't want to give them an answer that leads them in a certain direction. I have been known to say it's great to have one in place if you're at Disney World during the spring thaw, that it's going to automatically turn on. Because sump pump is, if they're coming from an apartment in Boston, they don't even know what a sump pump is. Do you guys know what a sump pump is?
I think I've seen it.
I have one in my house.
It's usually a pit in the floor, the pump in it, and if the groundwater comes up, or if you get water finds its way through your foundation, it'll go to the hole and get moved away.
I grew up with one. I thought that, just like you said, we always had one.
Yeah.
A lot of times people say, oh my gosh, there's something. I said, yeah, that's because you're in Milltown or Bridgewater or any of the, there's a reason these towns have these names. There's a lot of water around. There's places where you're going to have water, the water table's high. So what happens is, what we're really trying to find out is, do you get water once every 10 years and it's puddling? Or does this place flood on a regular basis? We're trying to get to the bottom of this. Hopefully the settler will be forthcoming with the history, but that's not something I rely on. I really need to take a look on my own. So what happens is, a classic example of when a sump pump is present but not in use anymore. The neighborhood used to be private septic. It was all cesspool. When I was a kid, I grew up in Braintree. They went through, and over the years, they hooked everything up. When you have a cesspool, in the morning when everyone gets up and take a shower, you flush the toilet, dishwasher, I don't know if you have a dishwasher then, but everything goes into the cesspool, it goes into the soil, and everyone in the street's doing the same thing.
At the same time.
That adds water to the system. So when you get that, 2 feet of snow in a rainstorm, and it all melts, there's less capacity. There's many neighborhoods where once they hooked up to town sewer, no one had water again. So you might still have the pump, the pit, the pipe. People will say to me, well, should I get rid of it? No. If you have I just experienced recently, if you have a hot water tank that goes in the basement and it cuts loose and you're not home, goes to the sump pit will stay ahead of it. You won't get a flood. If you have a water line that goes, same thing. So to me, it's not a bad thing to have if it's there and it's existing. I don't think it's a curse. We've had people tell us frequently, my father told me, if it has a sump pump, don't buy it. Well, there's certain communities where if that's the word, you're probably not going to buy there because it's a wet town and everyone has one. All right. The key is with a sump pump, there's a number of things we look for. When it pumps, it should pump far enough away that the water. I had a case where the sump pump went out the side of the house and it ended right there. The water would pump out the yard, and then you could actually see that it kind of came back in and filled back up. Pumped out, it came back. So you have to get it away from the house. You're trying to move it on. Right. The other thing is, a lot of people, there's 2 kinds of pumps. There's a pedestal pump, which is this tall, gangly thing, and it's unattractive and it doesn't look good.
That's what we had.
But there's a reason they make these. And then there's the pump you lower into the hole. The problem with the one you lower into the hole is it has the float that turns it off and on. The water level rises, it goes on, goes back down. Turns on, goes back down. The problem is, there's not a lot of adjustment there. And the classic story I have is, I have friends 2 brothers, they built a duplex, side by side. They both had the common wall, they both had sump pits right here. My friend put his sump pump in, and his brother put his sump pump about a foot lower. My friend's pump never came on, because his brother did all the pumping for both of them.
Awesome.
It was. He never mentioned it, and he never told his brother why his electric bill was more. And it's because his brother pumped it because he put it too low. If you have a house that's in a town with a high water table, what happens is, that springtime when all that snow melts, the water table rises. Let's say this is the basement, rises. It starts to hit the bottom of the floor. Pressure builds, and the water will start to come out in that crack. It'll come out around the support columns, the base of the stair, but it's hitting. What we're going to do is we're going to cut a hole. We're going to put the pump in, and by extracting that water, we're going to relieve the pressure and get that water level down. What my friend's brother did was, there's going to be times when that water's going to come within 8 inches, 6 inches of the floor, but then stop and go back. He put his pump in so low, he was pumping water that was never going to be an issue. So that's what we're looking for. The pump should be able to go in. It should have a certain amount of play. The pedestal pump we like better because you can set it. It'll go really, really deep. It'll pump out, shut off, and then it has a long swing before it comes back on. The one they lower in tend to be they go off on, and it kind of makes you kind of crazy. So with groundwater, with water in the basement, two places it comes from: rising water table or roof runoff. The water, you have bad grading. The water moves towards the house. It comes off the roof. You're not doing what you should. It gets against the foundation and comes in at cracks and seams. So two different approaches.
So with everything that he's said so far to scare you, just remember that when you're showing a house and they start to ask you these questions, you're going to say, this is something that you can ask of the home inspector. And say, have your questions ready so you make the best use of your time with him and his time with you.
That's right, just have them write them down and ask the question. That's what the guy's there for, the home inspector.
What we look for, when people will say, does the basement regularly get water? They'll say, oh, this basement never gets water. And you say, oh, so it never had water. It's got a sump. Yeah, it never gets water because we have a sump pump. And the home inspector here don't know, you do get water, but you've addressed it. A house that never gets water is one that does not get water. And that's something that we always get a chuckle as, this home inspector, when we get together, we assert, no, the house never gets water. And it's, as soon as they have a power outage, which happens during big storms, they get 1.5 foot of water. That's a whole different story. What we look for when we go in to try to kind of suss out the truth behind their statements, underneath the basement stairs, no one ever gets underneath the stairs and paints the back side of the stairs. So we always look underneath the stairs for watermarks. If you have a furnace where the filter goes, when you open that up, when a basement floods, they might gently wipe down everything that had stains on it. No one ever wipes out the inside of the furnace. Storage storm windows, anything that's shiny shows that dirt line when the water comes up. It's really hard to hide if there's been water. We go to a house that's for sale and the whole basement's newly painted completely. We just tell people all the history is removed. I can't really tell you. But again, what we want to know is, we've got a sump pump. You get water once in a great while, maybe some puddling over here and it ends up in the pit, or are we talking about 1.5 foot of water? And that's the difference. And
if you walk into the basement and you see that the washer and dryer are on a crate, what do you call it?
Platform. Just a platform, yeah.
It's kind of a red
now,
flag.
I will say,
unless you're
if you're one of those people, you go into the house and everything, all the storage in the basement's on pallets. I don't, if the house is really ship-shape, I don't begrudge people that. I'll tell them, look, what we look for is rust marks or anything like that.
Right.
Sometimes people move from a house that used to flood, and they still live in fear. So they put everything on pallets. It's not a bad idea to store your stuff on pallets because there's good air movement. Basements are damp. There's a hole in the ground where the moisture wants to go. So I don't initially curse them because of that. It puts me on notice that if the washing machine and the boiler all are on 6-inch or 12-inch platforms, that you got to be careful because that's the highest the water gets. But
some people will bring a contractor in, they'll put a French drain.
A perimeter drain.
Yeah.
Yep. Are you familiar with the perimeter drain? So let's say that the basement, let's say that this is the sump pit. So, this would be dug down through the floor, and in there, there'd be a pump. So any water that gets on the floor is going to come right in. Well, if the only place you can really put your pump is here, because of where the electric is and where you want it to go outside, but the water's coming in from over there, what they'll do is they'll come in with a jackhammer, and they'll break about 8 inches of the floor all the way around. They'll dig down, they'll put crushed stone and a pipe, so that if water comes in over there, it'll come down the foundation wall, or if it comes up, it'll go into the perforated pipe, it'll make the trip around, go into the pit, and it'll get pumped out.
Okay.
So we, in New England, call that a French drain. It's really just as one of those home inspector technically nerd things, but it's actually called a perimeter drain. A real French drain would be out in the yard. It's an exterior installation, but we call them French drains. And what that is it's a pipe under the floor. Sometimes they'll leave the pit open. Sometimes they'll pour concrete and leave a strip. Sometimes they'll have louvered pieces on it. But the goal is to intercept the water that comes up or down and deliver it to the pump. It doesn't always have to be all the way around. Sometimes if that back, the house is like built into a hillside, they'll put the pump in the corner and just run a strip across the back because the front never has a problem. But it is, we'll note, pump with French drain. All right.
Yeah, I found that. I did that in my house,
Yeah.
and I guess the previous owner had got rid of the garage that
Yeah.
was built into the house, and when they did that, they disturbed the original drain.
The real foot drain. They
Right.
call it a foot drain
Right.
around the house.
And it was, I guess, clay pipe.
Yeah.
So,
They cracked it.
yeah.
The beginning of no fun.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to, this is under the heading of, when you're selling property, because you know how they say there's a shoe for every foot. There's a place in Quincy, it's on the Quincy-Milton line, and there's a park. And about every 10 years, when the conditions are right, there's a little stream nearby, it floods. And it floods like people with canoes and boats out in it floods. And the neighborhood next to it gets dramatically flooded. So I'm doing an inspection on this house. I think last year, didn't this flood? And the bro's like, yeah. Everyone's like, yeah. In the basement, there's watermarks. I can see that the water, there's damage. I'm looking for the watermarks. I can't find it. Go over to the boiler. I'm looking at the boiler. Then I notice the watermarks on the pipe, on the exhaust pipe. It's like head height. Woman buying it. She's buying it. Who buys a house that probably once every 10 years gets about 5 feet of water in the basement? So we're talking. It's not my place not to tell you. I said, so you're aware? She goes, no. She goes, I grew up across the street. I know all about it. She goes, she's buying it. She loves it. Oh, I love the neighborhood. It's a great neighborhood. And what happened was, it starts coming up into the backyard. It's a walkout basement in this house. And they had sandbagged the whole back door. And they fought the good fight. And then it finally let go. And the problem is the basement was finished. You got to strip out all of the wiring, the walls, everything at that point to redo it. She could have cared less. And with the boiler, what they did is they took all the electronics off of it, took them upstairs, and after the flood, replaced the firebox inside, put everything back on, and fired it up. A boiler, generally, if it's a conventional boiler, it's just a big chunk of cast iron.
Well, to your point, right? She was comfortable with the neighborhood.
And I was shocked. She's like, no. She goes, I grew up here. She goes, I've seen this street flood all the, I know all about it. I was shocked that they could sell this place. I thought they were going to have to put the house on stilts, But no, there it is. The guy said, don't be paddling around.
Again, remember when you're at the inspection, if there's any questions, just ask.
Yep.
And then I think what she's trying to say is, don't become the expert. Let us be the expert. And it's just for you to have general knowledge and so like I'm fine with a sump pump. This lady was fine with that. He's fine with a campanelli. So don't you never know what's everybody's different. And sometimes termites are a bigger issue to other people, and especially other cultures. Termites to certain cultures is a big deal. Some people it's not a big deal. So you never know what's going to work for somebody. And with there, just remember, our question at the end always is, did it pass or fail the home inspection?
People ask us.
Did it pass? Well, it's not a pass-fail thing.
No, this wasn't that course in college. It's not pass-fail.
Yeah, we just give you the information. You and your real estate agent, or the buyer and the real estate agent. Now you can make an educated decision. And the other one is, would you buy this house?
No, how about this? Would you let your daughter live here?
Will not answer that question. Do you know what I mean? Because again, right? Sump pump, slab, 5 feet, French drain. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe poison.
So everybody has different experience. So we don't answer those questions, but that's always the ultimate question. So would you buy it? Did it pass?
Yeah. It's not a pass-fail.
Yeah.
It's the different the different ways they approach that, and that's what I teach. I teach our home inspectors as part of my job, and it's just we start off the beginning. It is never your decision should they buy it or not, and then you'll get the no. I mean off the record. 100 ways they'll try to get you to. And I don't know who you are. I don't know what that house with the watermark at 5.5 feet. I would not have gone near that with a 10-foot pole, no matter who you are. But she didn't care. She loved it. She knew just what she was going to do.
Yeah.
So it's not my place. People say, do you ever tell someone not to buy a house? And what comes to mind is I did a house in Somerville. It was a Victorian, and this single woman fell in love, and she was not handy or a craftsman, and she fell in love with the woodwork, and it was a beautiful Victorian. The brick foundation was done. In the rear corner, it was in failure. And she could not get by how beautiful the woodwork was, and stained glass windows and the whole thing. And we went through the inspection. She said, would you buy it? I said, look, what you need to do I said, I don't answer that question. And my answer would have been don't. Is you need to get a contractor. You need to find out what's, the extent of the damage and how it's going to be addressed, what's it going to cost. And I didn't see her for a couple months. And when I did, the next house she looked at was almost perfect. And we see that frequently where if people kind of fall in love with a house in a blind, we say it's a lot like falling in love. You see this house and it's everything you wished for, just like, whoever your mate is. And then,
And you go through 4 seasons.
Yeah, 4 seasons. And you're like, oh my God, as my wife says, oh my God, he leaves his underwear everywhere. Or, one of those deals, you know what I mean? And it's just, you do fall in love, and then when you come for the walkthrough and there's no furniture and there's no decorations, that's when they start to hear, oh, I do have work to do here. So with that woman, I didn't see the house that she looked at. I had heard nothing for months. And then it was she bought a 2-family in Somerville, and it was almost perfect. And the reason was she had learned from her past experience. She said to me, I just ignored everything from the sill up, and it was the outside and the basement. And I learned enough to get an idea of what I was looking for. Old steam boilers versus new steam boilers, just a lot of stuff like that.
And I think from where we stand, just, as new real estate experience, make sure you get the right house for the right person. It's like the fellow in Weymouth, he was a banker, he openly said to us, I don't even have a toolbox. So why are you buying a house on a seawall that every time there's a storm, you're rebuilding your deck? This is for a guy that wants to rebuild his deck every 3 years.
You better have a good shop there.
He worked at State Street Bank, and he's like, after being with the guy, he goes, I need to be in a townhouse. He goes, why am I buying a house on the seawall when I don't like to do stuff? If you live on a seawall, you better be a handy guy.
You want to get a new gas grill every year because the other one just turns into
but it's a different personality. Yeah. So make sure, I would just say that you interview your buyers and make sure you're getting them the right house for who they are and where they are.
Yeah.
That's our
Well, I do think we want to touch on, I don't know what time-wise what's going on, but other inspections.
Yeah, so there's other inspections that we do perform. We also perform.
There are some that we don't perform.
There are some. So Susan may have spoken about it. So we also perform lead paint inspections. And I'm going to give you a high-level lead paint.
Give me my glasses,
101 here. So what the law reads is any house built prior to 1978 where a child under age of 7 is going to reside, a home is supposed to be made in compliance with the Massachusetts lead law.
Does that mean lead-free, Sean?
No, it does not mean lead-free. So
there's no lead in the house?
Right. So what happens? So what happens is we come in. Now, let me regress. So any house built prior to 78. So that means if it's a single-family home in Chelmsford, if a child under the age of 7 there is going to reside there, the house is supposed to be made in compliance with the lead law. Now, single-family homes, where it's owner-occupied, and rental properties are completely different things. If you're going to have a rental property, you're going to have a child under the age of 6 residing there, 100% you should have a lead paint inspection done. Because it's against the law to rent to someone with a child under the age of 7 without a lead paint certificate. It's also against the law, as we all well know, to say to somebody, I'm not going to rent you this home because it has lead paint and you have children. So it's you got to be very careful with that. So you call us up, we'll perform the lead paint inspection.
If you live in that house as a landlord, do you have any input into who lives in the house?
You also, it's owner occupied, you have some, but you got to be careful. Like,
yes,
like
yes.
And
be
again,
careful.
I'm just the inspector. Again, we got to defer back to the real estate agent and the attorneys on that. I'm just there to inspect where the lead paint is and where it isn't. So what happens is we come and inspect the home. We use a lead paint machine. It's a very, very expensive piece of equipment. It gives us a reading in the window from 0 to 10. We press it against everything that's painted in the home. Anything greater than 1.0, the state says is too high. So it doesn't matter if it's 1.1 or 10. Either way, it's too high. It needs to be abated. So what needs to be abated? So we come and we test everything. What needs to be abated? Friction surface. Friction impact surfaces. What's the definition of a friction impact surface? Sash cord window, or an old window that moves up and down that creates a lead dust. You'll hear people over and over and said, well, I'm not going to let the kids chew the woodwork or the windowsills. My kid won't get lead sick. What they've learned over time is that it's lead dust generating situations. It's not that kids chew on the baseboard or the door casing or the door. It's when you have an old window that moves up and down, creates a lead dust, hand to mouth contact. Little boy or girl's playing dolls or trucks, or they're moving up and down on the windowsill, put it in their mouth, the lead dust. That's where they speculate the lead elevated lead levels come into play. So we'll test everything that's there in the home. We'll give you the report. We'll give it, then at that point, the licensee letter comes in, reads the report, and removes the lead paint from the necessary areas. Only areas that need to be abated, because they've lessened the rules and regulations, windowsills and impact surface areas such as sash cord windows, door casings, and door jambs, and treads and risers. Before, you'd have to de-lead outside windowsills, railings, sidings of home, outside decks. So they really made it a lot easier to make homes in compliance with the lead law. So that's an addition, that's an additional cost to the home inspection. We send a different inspector for that inspection, so we can kill two birds with one stone.
It's a whole nother inspection.
It's a whole other inspection, it's a whole completely different experience.
Just many years ago, we used to kind of do it as a combined thing, and we'd be there all day. There was just no, do you remember in the beginning?
Of course.
It was stumbling
Yeah.
down.
Now we send two guys, just keep the whole thing moving. We'll supply the inspection report. If they want to have it de-leaded, they take that report, or not de-leaded, made in compliance with the lead law. Remember, because you do not have to remove all the lead paint. So when you hear a landlord say, this home's de-leaded, it's lead-free, I have a lead-free certificate. Lead-free certificate do not exist. The only certificate that there is saying that the house is in compliance with the Massachusetts lead law.
It has to be maintained that way.
Maintain that way. So you can have lead paint on the ceiling, the walls, the floors, baseboards. But if it's not chipping, peeling, or flaking, you're in compliance with the lead law.
Now, when you say maintain, say in regards to rentals.
No chipping,
No
flaking.
no chipping, peeling, or flaking.
Okay.
So yearly, I know very few people do this. Landlords are supposed to come back in and do a walkthrough and make sure that there isn't chipping, peeling, or flaking. Lead paint.
And you can be hung out to dry if you let it happen.
Yeah. So,
when you handle that, you just scrape it and paint over it, or do you have to?
No. So now, if it's been identified as, very good point, it's been identified as lead paint, so someone with the proper authority and experience is the only one who can scrape the lead paint, because they don't want landlords in there scraping a windowsill that contains lead paint, or tenants. So it has to be handled properly.
The course.
Well, so there's also a course you can take as a homeowner. It's a low risk abatement course, so that a landlord or a homeowner can take this course and teach you how to
address
some of the areas.
Certain issues. You're limited in what you can do. You can't be in there sanding
You
away.
can't scrape or sand away, but if you wanted to remove that door, you can remove the door. But there isn't any high impact or high risk de-leading such as scraping.
So if a landlord has a letter of compliance, theoretically, that is good.
That's what you want.
At the time it was issued,
At the time it's issued,
things were in compliance.
And how long does it take? What's the duration of it?
as long as all the paint, all the lead paint that was identified is still not chipping, peeling, or flaking.
Okay.
So
and
that
who determines that? Who will come and see that it's chipping and all that?
So that's left up to the landlord and the tenant to communicate and decide if it's chipping, peeling, or flaking. So once the lead paint, for example, if I identify this wall right here as lead paint, okay, and it's intact and beautiful like this, you're in compliance.
Okay.
If it becomes chipping or flaking, the house is no longer in compliance, then the landlord and the tenant, some onus is on the tenant, they have to have a conversation to have the right person to come in and now make this so it's intact.
And it's usually that if there is a concern, the tenant will probably bring it up because they're living there and they're concerned. The landlord will go in and do it because they generally don't. They're smart enough to protect their investment. And the one thing about flaking paint is it only gets bigger and more the longer you leave it. So if you can get, the sooner you identify that and to address it, the better off you are.
But they did a really nice job end of last year of lessening the rules and regulation in order for a unit to come in compliance with the lead law. Because what was happening is there was so many homes with lead paint or rental units with lead paint that the landlords could not afford to make them in compliance with the lead law. So there was becoming a great shortage of housing for people with children. Right, so now they've really made it a lot more reasonable for the landlords to make the homes in compliance with the law.
So when you're inspecting a property built before 1978, do you ask if there was a lead compliance?
Very good question, yes.
As a home inspector, I don't go near what it is. When they call and book the inspection, they'll say, it's the household in 1978. Would you like to have a lead inspection? That type of thing. In our contract, it says we are not inspecting for, and it lists a whole bunch of stuff. Lead paint is in there. Okay. If they have a question, as a home inspector, I've been through numerous seminars, just to be educated about it. I can answer their questions about, you know, the big picture. Like, if you're concerned, you know, you might, and sometimes we'll look around and you can tell that it's all vinyl replacement windows, all the trim is natural, and you can tell it's all been done recently. You say it looks like you're moving in the right direction. I can't tell you the place is safe, but things look pretty, you know, I'm used to seeing this stuff, things look pretty good.
So
That's as far as I'd go.
But remember, the lead inspector has a completely different license
Yep.
than the home
And
inspector.
the lead inspector would see if there was a past
Yeah,
compliance
so
letter.
if you're gonna look at a home, you're gonna go to the website called CLIP, CLPPP, Child Lead Paint Prevention Program. And you can put in your address there, and if there's ever been a compliance letter if that house is ever made in compliance with the lead law, they'll be registered with the state of Massachusetts. So you put in the address, it'll show you the whole history, so it'll say no records found, or it'll say, yes, you know, 2010, they had an original inspection, in 2011, it was made in compliance with the lead law. So that's when we'll know. A lot of landlords people say, oh yeah, I have a lead paint certificate. I have a lead paint certificate. And then all of a sudden, there we are, the day before the closing. Can you get out there today? No one ever came up with a lead paint certificate. You know why they didn't come up with a lead paint certificate? Because it doesn't exist. Or they've owned the multifamily house that's been in the family for 50, 60 years. We never used lead paint. So they automatically assume that they wouldn't have lead paint, and they don't know a thing about the lead paint law and how it really works. So when everybody says, when someone really has a lead paint certificate, it's like holding the gold medal. If you're a multi-family home and you have if you have compliance letters, I mean you're putting that in your listing.
Yeah.
You're letting the world know this house is in compliance with the lead law because it holds great value.
Copies at the Board of Health, right?
Well, maybe the lead guy might have them in his basement or attic.
So who will have the lead paint? Who will have the certificate? The landlord, the lead paint inspector, and also should be one registered with the state. Now I've had people come looking for me.
Crazy.
They'll tell you all the time. Can you find? I don't have my lead paint inspection. Well, what have I done? 1995. So I'm literally up in an attic looking for a lead paint certificate since 1995. You know, we do keep all our files, but it gets to a point, you know, 95, 93, you know.
So with older lead paint certificates, you said that if work is done, it has to be done by somebody who's like certified to work with lead paint.
Yes.
If you're doing a lead inspection and there was an ancient thing, do you ask to see if there were permits pulled or work done?
So there wouldn't be permits pulled. So I would ask is who was the licensee letter who did the work?
Yeah. We don't see.
Well, I mean, if there was work done to the house afterwards, say they got the letter of compliance, there was lead, and then they added.
This sounds personal.
They did a renovation. Well, no, I'm
It might.
just curious.
What happens? The two things I see traditionally in the past, we used to see like a lot of Dorchester rental property, that kind of stuff was. We'd see the crazy, uneducated, the hard 4 foot, then eventually 5 foot marks down. So we'd see homeowners who do it without any knowledge. You can see it as soon as you get there, you knew it was wrong. And then the other one that you're talking about is once it's been documented and everything's been identified, it had like a true lead inspection, and all of the surfaces are documented. If someone comes back in later, and it turns out that there's doors and windows missing and that kind of stuff.
I think what he's speaking of, there's two different things. There's a little area there. So you have the right as a homeowner to replace your windows. But once you start replacing those windows for the purpose of de-leading,
Compliance letter is.
once you start replacing leaded windows for the purpose of de-leading and you're not licensed, it's illegal. But if you're replacing your windows just because you
want to save energy.
You want to save energy and heat and put in vinyl replacements, you have the right to do that.
So it's it's kind of a gray, it's almost like a loophole where if your goal is not to de-lead, but along the way, you know, some people they'll remodel and the door and the casing ends up in the dumpster.
Right.
And it's not because it was lead on it, it's because that's not the style I'm going for, you know.
So, but the key is have it tested, have a de-leader remove it. We come back and see that the de-leader did it right. Then we supply the letter of compliance. And don't wait till the day before closing looking for the letter of compliance.
But work done after the letter of compliance is issued means that the letter of compliance does no good now?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say it wasn't any good. Depends if you have the right to do work afterwards, but were you doing work on areas that were lead paint? If they weren't identified as lead paint, then there's nothing illegal. But if you're starting to remove things that were lead paint, then that creates a problem. Especially remember, just like the home inspections what is it? It's a
Visually non-destructive inspection.
That was good.
Yeah, but remember the lead paint inspection is about the safety of children.
Oh, consumer protection.
Just like the home inspection, consumer protection law. The lead paint inspection isn't to give a landlord a headache or the real estate agent or anybody. It's about protecting children. So at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, as a good person, am I risking anyone right now, any children, with doing this? And that's all you have to ask yourself. And so if you can answer that question, am I putting a child in risk right now? And whatever way that answer goes, then you as a good person and a citizen, you make the decision what should be done next. A lot of landlords lose that it's not about them, it's not about beating the system, it's not about beating the lead inspector, it's about the safety of the children. And that's the ultimate.
Yeah.
What do you do about people nailing or screwing down tin over windowsills?
Well,
Well, it has to be done in it has to be done in a workmanlike manner.
Workmanlike manner, yeah.
You know.
It's acceptable. Well, it's
It's not acceptable. It's never acceptable because they never do it right.
Well,
anyway,
it's so if it was done by someone who knew what they're doing and it was done right, it's acceptable. But no one.
Yeah, they're not gonna, anyone who knows that they're not going to put tin over windows.
We hate to keep beating up on three families, but you go there and there's a sheet of plexi screwed over every basement window, and it's big enough that it covers everything. From the outside.
I think you got some lead experience.
No, I know. Yeah. But that's.
Because anyone who would even think about it, I'm sure you have somewhere along your line you touched with a lead situation. I can tell.
I'm a landlord and I've sold some properties, like old houses that have.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and if they're old, they're going to have lead. That's just the way it is. Just you know.
There was a time when we thought that eventually there'll be no lead anymore. You know, it was like.
Well, eventually,
eventually.
You're still filming, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How much time do you need, Tom? Tom's on next.
Oh, sorry. Jeez,
as much as I can get, I suppose.
Okay.
Do you want a quick couple of minutes on radon? Just a couple?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Radon gas. Naturally occurring gas. Rises up from below. Tends to collect below levels of the home. Usually it's the type of bedrock stone that's deep underneath the house. Comes up, collects. They equate it with smoking cigarettes. One of the biggest, it's the biggest cause of lung cancer, cigarettes and radon. It can be addressed much like a sump pump will address water. Radon is addressed by put that, the hole in the floor, dig a pit, crush stone, perforated pipe. The pipe leads outside. Above the roof line is a fan. By creating a constant suction under the house, as the radon comes up, it's drawn to the pipe, and it's moved on. Okay. We do radon testing. It's a 48-hour test. We put canisters down, vials. They take an air sample. They go to the lab and they test to see if there's a presence of radon. There's also a machine that does it. It's a little more accurate. You leave the machine. It senses whether there's been dramatic changes in air pressure, which means doors and windows may have been opened. You get the results when you pick it up. Brokers generally like the machine because it gets placed by someone who handles the machine. When they pick it up, the results are given right then. The broker has very little to do with it besides making sure the door's open. With the vials that we use, we put them down at the time of the inspection, but the buyer has to come back to mail them. That adds 2 days there, 2 in the mail, 5th day for testing, and the broker has to get involved. Sometimes the broker volunteers to do it, it's up to them, so the broker does get involved. So the machine is more popular, it's more expensive.
It's tamper-proof as well.
Yeah, it is tamper-proof.
And this is like something that, is it optional? Or
Optional.
Is it like, okay.
Yeah. It's optional.
So radon's an off-gassing of uranium, and it's the second leading cause of lung cancer. EPA says. We do a lot of the testing. Again, go back. I actually have a home that I have the sump pump and I have a mitigation system.
Yeah.
Do you have a minute?
Nope.
No. I actually have radon in my house. I have a mitigation system, and I'm fine with it. And you'll see when you go to look at a home, you'll see this pipe coming out of the side of a home, and it has a fan on it or something that's round going up the side of the home. That's a radon mitigation system.
So
and nobody will even, a lot of people don't know they have radon.
Anytime, right? So say how that doesn't have it today can have it in the next couple of years?
Usually what they find is that unless you've changed it, you finished the basement, sometimes you put a built-in pool in the yard, something that was a dramatic change to change the dynamics. They'll tell you you can test every couple of years, that type of thing. But if you test and it comes out a low or reasonable level, the action number is 4.0 picocurious. So it's 4 parts per million. That number is some people say arbitrary in a sense, where other countries it's 10. But radon in water it's southern New Hampshire has they have their own host of things, but that little band that goes down to it. So southern New Hampshire, they have a problem in New Hampshire itself. Arsenic is a huge problem. And the closer you get to New Hampshire, you have to be aware of that. And then radon, so radon and water is just a bigger issue up there. Have you had to deal with that at all?
One listing
Yeah,
a couple of years ago.
yeah. It's,
That was the source of the radon in the house.
yeah.
Was it? Yeah.
Well, that's what, it's crazy because they fixed the radon in the water and then there's no more radon,
Done.
you know? But it is a crazy system they have to put in. It's kind of like almost like a
Like a
fish.
bubbling
Yeah, the
thing,
bubble
yeah.
up. It just releases the gas. So,
Any questions, concerns? Well, if you're out there and you see anything funky or anything, always call us.
yeah.
We do. We stay right in our lane. We just only talk about home inspections. We don't get sidetracked with being roofers, plumbers, electricians. We've been offered to do a lot of different things. Home inspections, 24/7. That's fortunately and unfortunately, that's all we talk about.
So if you're out there and there's some aberrant home inspector behavior or anything like that, if you have any questions, just give us a call.
And Mike also sits on the home inspection board
Yeah.
at the state level.
I'm not representing the board at this time.
No, but
I have to say that.
you have to say that. So this is what we do. I wish you well. Be patient. There's a lot coming at you, but I think you put in the right. Make sure you surround yourself with people. They know that. I think that's the trick. Surround people